Okay, let's start. Okay, for today's meeting, and then this week. Okay, let's go over the schedule we are doing. Okay, today we are going to talk about epistemology, utilitarianism, and the state of nature based on Mohism's text, and compare with other Chinese philosophers and the Western philosophers. So that's the thing we are going to do for this way, kind of like review for everything. So probably for all the philosophers, we will touch a little bit. Next week, Pin is going to read the Taoism, Zhuangzi, the very first chapter of the inner chapters, which is a happy journey, or sometimes called translated as a happy excursion, sometimes translated as happy wander around, something like this. So that's a very important text in Chinese philosophy and also in Chinese literature. So I think Pin is going to bring us to a happy journey. So we'll be much happier than Mohism philosophy. And then after that, in March, we are going to kind of finish all the ancient, okay, in the warring state philosophy. We're going to the Yin Yang school, okay, and this one is kind of between warring state and Han dynasty. Then we are going to move on, okay. So we have been stuck in the ancient time for over a year, almost a year. So right now we are going to move to a new era. Okay, so we will see a different flavor of that. So that's our schedule. And then before we start, we have been talking about Mohism for a few times. So I would like to, any volunteer want to give a quick summary? What do you know about the Mohism and how do you feel about Mohism? It's too boring or interesting or anything? Please be honest, because I need to know how people's feeling about this. Any volunteers? Okay, James, please.
I wanted to say that I didn't finish the reading, but I'm kind of excited about what I read. I'm really excited to find out that there were some writers that were so interested in epistemology and logic, and that seems to me to be, and they were, this was kind of like in reference to the Chinese nominalist school, or the school of names, as he puts it. So I think I think this is this is kind of like a big discovery for me. I'm looking forward to reading this author that he talks about. So yeah, so that's all I know, is that this particular subject, he calls it dialectic, but I would say it's more related to it's a little more related to ontology. Okay. But it's definitely it falls under the subject of logic, and I think I saw it as very coherent and interesting.
Thank you, James. Is anyone feel like it's too boring or too difficult on this Mohism, especially like logic or something? No? Okay. So just share my personal experience on the Mohism reading. Actually, I'm quite excited when I read this one, because many years ago, when I was young, I tried to understand Mohism, especially on his logic, and I find out it's difficult. And right now I know why it's difficult, because it's very Westernized style. So after I know more about the Western philosophy and the logic, I find out that it's much easier to understand, because it's very different than other Chinese philosophy. So that's what I'd like to share. And the Pin, please.
Oh yeah, yeah. Thank you, Jason, for introducing Mohism, just want to give everyone a little bit of context. So in the Zhou dynasty, so before 2,000 years ago, really there were two great schools of Chinese thought considered at that time. At that time, now we have all these different schools, but at that time, there were only two that were important enough that all philosophers mentioned. Well, not all, but many of them mentioned, and they would mention them together, was Confucianism and Mohism. So Mozi, today is rather obscure, but back in his own era, he really was up there in parallel with Confucius. A very, very important figure. And he was a very interesting person. As we all see, his philosophy approach is very different from all the other his contemporaries. And also he was a polymath. He was an inventor, a scientist, and a philosopher, and also really, in a way, he was a peacemaker. He actually did go around all the different states in China. Whenever he saw there was a war about to happen, he would go to the rulers and try to convince them not to wage war. And he was successful several times. So really very interesting figure, but I personally had never read Mozi itself. Well, I kind of browsed it a couple of times, but so I was really glad, Jason, you picked this reading. It was very interesting.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for a great summary. And then actually Mozi's reading is difficult, especially for Mo Jing. Okay, that's about logic. They're very short, and I'm going to share with everyone today. Yeah, okay, let's move on. Okay, so before I start, I think I shared this many times, and I just want to share one more time to remind everyone if you haven't joined previous section. So this one, I will assume that's common, okay, for Chinese and also for the Western philosophy, okay, even for today. Okay, so every proposition, okay, when we say proposition, we mean a statement which has a truth value. So I say today is a raining day. It's either true or false. That's a proposition. But if I say thank you or I say welcome to my home, that's not a proposition because there's no true or false. So every proposition we can have a subject and a predicate, right? So for example, Socrates is a philosopher. So Socrates is the subject. A philosopher is predicate. When I say this is a cat, cat is the subject. But this is a subject and a cat is the predicate. So I think we will assume that's all true, okay, for all philosophers, okay, or everybody talk. And then certain name we want to make sure it's clear is subject, okay, in Mohism, or we call actuality, 实, okay, because this one is the real thing, which is impermanent, right? Socrates will die, and he already dead. This is a cat. When I say this, it could be next time I point to the other one. And then it's a concrete reality, okay? It's relative, okay? It's not absolute, okay? But when we use a predicate, okay, for example, a philosopher or cat, okay, so basics, we talk about the name. In Mohism, call it name, Ming, okay? And also in the school of name, we call Ming, okay? And which is permanent because of like concept like philosopher, like a cat, that's an abstract category, which is not concrete. And then it's absolute because it never change. So that's the basic concept, okay, of today. We are going to start on this one. So we are going to move on. And do you have anyone have any question or anything want to talk about? Otherwise I'm going to move on for today's subject. Okay, so I'm going to review on the, okay, that's the one thing I kind of disagree with, with Pin. Pin said Moses is a polymath, which I don't think so, because I believe when we say Moses as a book, it's not written by one person. If we look at this book, if written by one person, we can say this person is a polymath because he talked about ethics, he talked about he's a peacemaker, he is an engineer. For example, he tell you how to prepare the stair, how to build the gate. He talk about logic, okay? And then he criticized all the philosophers. He is a polymath, but I don't think that's finished by one person. They must be finished with a group of people, and they're probably over like 100 years. So people keep adding up. So depending on how you view who wrote this one, if you consider this one is the group work, collective work, then Moses probably just a leader. Okay, and then if you consider this one, this book is written by one person, then this guy for sure is a polymath. It's really a genius because he can write so many things and work on so many different fields. So today, in general, that Moses' teaching, most important is two things. One is the so-called impartial love. This one, impartial love, or some translation called general love. Some to the okay. And another thing is Feng condemnation of aggression war. This one is his two most important philosophy. And then today we will focus more on so-called Mo Jing, okay, which is book 10 in chapter 40, 41 to 44. No, actually to 45. I missed one. Okay, should be 45. So this book are so-called Mo Jing, which is totally on logic and dialectic. Okay, so that's the part we're going to do. So when we read this part, we almost don't need have any knowledge about the Chinese historical background because it's just a pure system, pure logic system. So we are going to deal with this one. So we are going to move on, talk about first subject is Mohism's epistemology. Okay, so before we move on, anybody, any question or any thing want to talk about, please raise your hand. Okay, look like
Jason.
Yes, please.
Oh yeah, there was another point I forgot to make. Anyway, what you said, I don't disagree with. You know, these historical things are open questions.
Yes.
But another thing is of the major schools of Chinese philosophy, I always found that Mozi was most closest. The Mohism school was closest to conventional sense of religion, in the sense that he talked about the afterlife. He believed in that, and also I think he actually had intentions of forming a religion that works for a certain human universal cause. So of all the schools of major Chinese philosophy, this is the only one where I can see that it was maybe qualified, you know, as a religion in the conventional sense.
Yes,
so
agree.
That's just an interesting thing.
Yeah, I think the Moses in traditional for last 2,000 years in Chinese intellectual, okay, not being focused. I think Mohism probably being discovered by the Jesuit priest when they come to China. That's I think, you know, and or I read it in somewhere because this one is religion-like. When I think a few weeks ago, I read this table, and I think that this book, this 71 chapter of book, okay, it's 15 books. To me, look like a Bible, right? Look like they include everything. So their behavior, also like religion. So you are right. I agree with you, and I think that probably is common agreement on that. Mohism is, you can call it a religion. And today we will focus on the logic part of this one. So let's go on the first subject we are going to talk about is epistemology. In the epistemology, we can, I think in Mohism, put it in 3 parts. Okay, first is the knower, the person who knows, and the object, the knowledge, the known, and the process. How do you know? Okay, so that's the 3 parts. Okay, so all these 3 parts is written on Mohism's book on chapter 40 and 42. 40, I just remind everyone, 40 is so-called the Mohism canon. They list 100 different terminology. All right. So that's Mohism's canon. And chapter 42 is canon 1's exposition. So in general, when I talk about 40 or canon 1, that means 40 and 42. That's the canon and the canon's exposition. Okay, so so that's all of this is there's 100 terms defined in the canon 1. So here, that's how Mohism defined. I list the text. Okay, so this word, okay, you probably see this box because this the text, it doesn't exist in today's language. Okay, so I think Feng, YouLan consider one this is mind. Okay, so okay, let's read the English part. If you know Chinese, you can read the Chinese part. So the knower, he talk about the person, the faculty of a person know. So the first, 智, the intelligence, the know. Hold on, let me see. The intelligence, knowing faculty, which is that by means of which one knows, by which itself does not necessarily know, like eyesight. So first thing is talk about your intelligence. Second thing is talk about thinking or forethought. 虑, okay, by means of one's intelligence, one seeks something but does not necessarily find it, like a peeping. He used the example, okay? Intelligence is just like eyesight. Thinking is just like a peeping when you want to see something. Knowing, that's the connection, okay, is that in which knowing faculty meets the object and is able to apprehend its form and the shape, like seeing. And the number 4 process is understanding. That's a mind thought, okay? Is that by means of which one understands the object of knowledge, like clearness of sight. So basically, this one you can view as a 4 process, okay? Like your nature, innate intelligence, the seeking, you are looking for something, picking, and then connection and understanding. So that's how Mohism define, okay, the knower, the process you know things. Okay, Ginny, you have a question or you have comment?
Jason, I'm going slightly off topic, but this is my question. I've been to a few of these meetings that you've hosted, as well as the 52 Living Ideas, Shrikhan and all that. And all these, whether it be Mohism, Taoism, it just seems like such a wise and peaceful way of living. And yet, when I think of what Xi Jinping is doing, how he is governing his country, and what's happening in China, I just don't get the sense that this type of philosophy, doctrine, if you want to call it, has influenced these leaders. So why is that? I mean, why?
Okay, Ginny, I'm sorry. I think this one is outside subject, but it doesn't mean we don't concern this one. And I just have to quick answer this question is most of people don't read it. Okay, so and then why we have to read it? Because that probably run in many people's foundation. Okay, so this one is an open question. Okay, I think, Ginny, that's a great question, but it's an open question. We have no way to answer. And then I think at the end, we probably can discuss this kind of question. But in every presentation, any meetup, this kind of question is coming out. So thank you for asking, but sorry, I cannot discuss this one at this moment. So,
hey, Jason,
yes,
so yeah, so I will just say to Jenny's question, yeah, obviously on logic, I don't know how much time Xi Jinping and his deputies spent time on logic, but I actually do think they spent quite a bit of time on utilitarianism, you know, and especially on the version from Bentham and Mills. The key is how you define what is universal good and what is good for everyone, right? Because that's kind of up to interpretation. So from a pure philosophical point of view, you couldn't really say for sure if the current government is not doing the right thing, if the actual belief is enforcing a policy that does universal good. In fact, most governments that's not like in a civil war scenario is practicing some form of this utilitarian Bentham Mills government, which is Moshi touches on also when he talk about universal love. I'll just stop. But it's nothing with logic. Yeah, with logic, no. Yeah, so that's more on the utilitarian part.
Okay, so let's focus on epistemology at this moment. Okay, so we need to stay focused on this one. Okay, so after doing the knower, okay, then let's talk about the knowing process. So if you look at the Chinese part, the Mohism writing is very simple, and that's why I make it so difficult. And then all these subjects have been covered. If you read in Plato's dialogue, they've been covered in Plato's dialogue. But in Plato's dialogue, I don't know how many words. I think I have 35 books, and each one is long. Okay, but you can see in Mohism, the book, the writing is so short. So talking about the knowing, he talked about 3 processes of knowing. You will see that's totally matched in the Western philosophy. So basically talk about knowing. They have 3 ways of knowing. Hearsay, okay, based on the writing record, having received the knowledge from others. That's his explanation. And the dialectics, that's inference, knowing something without being limited by space. That's his explanation. And the personal experience, knowing by personal observation. So Mohists is talking about they have the 3 different kinds of acquired knowledge, the source of knowledge, right? From authority, or you can call hearsay, or by dialectic, which is logic, inference, and we will have a further discuss on this one. Then they have from the personal experience. So that's the knowledge he is talking, the source of knowledge he's talking about. Then the third thing is the know, the knowledge, the object which we know. So he talked about they have 4 kinds of knowledge. Okay, so I highlight here on the 名实和为 that he has explanation. First is the name. Okay, remember we talk about Socrates is a philosopher. The name, philosopher is the name. So that's one of knowledge. Actuality, Socrates, the real person, okay, is also the object of knowledge. Combined together become the subject and predicate, or you want to call actuality and the name, become a proposition, okay, they call 和, okay, that's also another kind of knowledge. Then the action, okay, is to intend and perform, okay, your action, okay, how to do it, that's also kind of knowledge. So we talk about they have 4 different kinds of knowledge in this case. And then let's see, about the name, we talk about the name here. He further divided the name with 3 kinds of name, okay, 达, 类, 师, okay, here's the explanation. The first is the general name, the class name, and the private name. Okay, so he used the example. Okay, the general name is a general concept. Okay, and class name is like a journal. Okay, for example, he used the first example like this object. I think the classifying like a horse. Okay, is a class name. And the private name, he used the name called Zhang, 命之Zhang. Okay, somebody's name. So sounds like Zhang is a common name. So the translation called Jack. Okay, it's a very common name. Jack is a private name. So when he talk about the knowledge, they have the name, actuality, proposition, and action. In the name, they have three kinds of name: general, class name, and the private name. Then he moved on, okay, and remember we talk about dialect, okay. Dialectic also important in Mohism text. So he further divided. There are 7 different kinds of methods of dialectics. Okay. So let me go.
Joseph has his hands up.
Joseph, please.
So it's kind of like a taxonomy that we're looking at here, that on the previous slide.
Yeah.
Is that the basic? And then that's what I guess James was referring to. It's like kind of more ontological approach that's being taken.
Yes, I'm not expert on that. I just read the original text, but I don't see he has such a detail, okay, like Aristotle, okay, has like all the detail category, but he just has the concept of the category on that. So that's the only thing I know.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you.
Any other question or comment? Okay, so let's move on the 7 different methods of dialectics. Okay, so I see, my personal feeling is I see that's not easy, okay, for the people in that time, and use Chinese language. Chinese language is very different than, let's say, compared to Greek, because it's a I don't want to talk too much on this, but basically, I find that I really appreciate this kind of method. That's why I list the 7 methods of dialectics. And I think in Feng YouLan's book, Feng YouLan also explained, and I'm not sure he's doing a good job. So I kind of make a little bit change on that. So especially on the translation. So first, we can start to think about the way I look at this one is during the debate. If somebody make a statement, there's 7 different ways you can respond to the people's statement. First, you will say not all, which is particular judgment, right? When people say something, you can give an exception, okay? Not all like this. That's one way you can respond. Or you can say as a hypothetical judgment, right? You make, if it's not like this, okay, then what's going on? That's another way to argue. Number 3, they call it imitation. Okay, I call it modeling. I think it's much better as modeling. Just like you take this model to examine your statement. Okay, somebody says something, you just build a model, hypothetical model, and then see the result is the same as the person's result or different. That's another way to do it. Another one is, I call it analog. Feng YouLan call it comparison. Basics is to run in the, use analog method to compare, okay, your statement and your opponent's statement. And number 5, called mode, that's a parallel. The parallel that compare 2 arguments with the other. And another one, supporting. You can say so. Why can't I say something like this? Okay, so you just kind of like use different evidence to support. And number 7, which is use extension. Use the same logic to extend from the people's statement. So Mohism lists 7 different kinds of dialect method, okay, in his book. So that's about my summary about on Mohism epistemology. So I kind of put this chart here, okay. If you look at this one, basically in Mohism epistemology, first talk about knower. There's the two different kinds we can consider as a process or components: intelligent, thinking, connecting, understanding. And talk about the knowing process. They have hearsay, dialectics, and the personal experience. In the dialect, and he lists further divided for different methods of dialect. And about the knowledge itself, he talk about name, talk about the actuality, which is the subject. Name is the predicate. And he also further divides 3 different kinds of name, okay, on that. And they talk about proposition, talk about the action. So that's the overall summary on Mohism epistemology. So any comment on this one, or anything you read has a different idea you want to talk about?
Hey, Jason, can you give example between analog and parallelism?
I probably don't have a good example on that. Okay, because
that one confuses me when I read it, because they seem to be the two sides of the same coin.
Okay, so which one? Can you give me the number?
4 and 5.
4 and 5. Okay, let me try. Okay, I think 4. When I read it, I will say, let's say Socrates is a philosopher, right? That's my understanding. Okay, I'm no expert on this. I just read it and I feel this way. When you say Socrates is a philosopher, so you can, if you want to further discuss this one, you can say, let's say Confucius is you already know. Let's say Confucius, you already know. Confucius, let's say, okay, Kant, Immanuel Kant is a philosopher. So it's a comparable, okay. I think this one is more like a parallelism, right? So it's number 5. If you say Socrates is a philosopher, then I will say Kant is a philosopher. So it's a parallel comparison. So you will compare Kant with Socrates. These two philosophers are the same or not. And then analog is more like, how do I say that? Anybody have a better example? Use other, by the text, it say, use 举他物以名之, use other things to explain. Okay. So, for example,
can I have a go? Can I have a go? Tell me if I'm wrong. So an analog or analogy,
okay.
you might, the human mind is like a computing system.
Oh, yeah.
It has governance and management and operation, which is our biological urges, plus our overall, our virtue ethics is our governance. So you kind of map an organization onto a human or a state or something, right? So by analogy, right? Parallelism, to me, I'm guessing, tell me if I'm wrong, parallelism would be somebody makes a proposition, let's say, about the existence of Allah, right? Or Jesus or something like that, right? And then you give it straight back to them, but you put the word Zeus instead. And so, does this still make sense to you? Are you still believing this? It's the same argument, but we've just slotted in something to, whether that's parallelism, I don't know. That's my guess.
Yeah, I think that's a good guess. I will agree with you. You know, so.
Just sorry.
Here you have something.
Yeah, just to add quickly. Yeah, I'm looking at the original text in Chinese. So yeah, number 4 is, let's say I'm trying to describe something. And I try to, but it's something that you don't know. So I'm trying to mention something you already know. To, like, if I'm describing something that looks like a light bulb, but but to illustrate what I'm trying to describe to you that you don't know yet. So I would say, well, it's like a light bulb in this way. And number 5 is saying that if you accept, also, it's also starting with something you're familiar with. If you agree with this line of argument, then you would also agree with this similar line of argument to reach this conclusion.
Thank you, Pim. Thank you very much. You saved me. So I'd like to use this one. Okay, so I think that's a good example. Okay, so basically talk about intelligence, like eyesight, thinking, like a period, okay, and knowing, like seeing, and understand, like clearness of sight. That's kind of, so-called analog it's using. Yeah. We have other question. Anybody have? Okay, Madeline, please.
Yes, well, I like the slide on knowledge because it puts it all together. It says that
This one?
No, before that one, the one that
Oh,
just
okay, the slide
knowledge.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was down a little bit.
Is this one? Oh, knowledge. You want to talk about knowledge? This one.
Yeah, so that was the first one I wanted to talk about. I like that one because it just sort of proceeds and puts things together in such a common sense way. Like that you wouldn't be doing one of these or worrying about one of these on its own, that you really are going to be using all of them all at the same time. And then the slide about names.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, I'm just trying to move the
that's the name.
chat things. Yeah, so what I was thinking about that is the Chinese has a sort of built-in name classification system, which is the classifier words, also called measure words. And I don't know if the book is specifically referencing those there, but maybe you could just explain those to us a little bit, because it seems like that meshes with this part.
When you talk about measurement, you talk about like a pencil, a people, a horse, they have a different measurement.
Actually, the measure words classifiers, like one that you might use for paper and table and leaf.
Yeah. That's a very confusing part. I don't want to go this part.
I was just wondering if this concept is referring to that at all.
I don't think so. And Pin, do you agree?
I don't think so.
Yeah, that's different, and that's the measuring name is a very amazing thing, because I don't know. I know so much until I see somebody learn Chinese. He has to memorize all kind of measurement, and pencil, pig, dog, cow, table, chair. They're all different units. So
it's like in English, you can't say one paper. You have to say one piece of paper.
Yeah, but
you can't say one hair is one string of hair. So, but in Chinese, there's a requirement like that for every noun.
Yeah, that's a big subject, and I don't know. That's so complicated.
We don't in Chinese. We don't say one fish. It's one strip fish. One strip of fish.
Yeah, that's right. That's and depending on who you are, I will say what kind of person. Yeah. Okay, so. That's the.
I raised my hand, man.
Oh, sorry, Kevin, please.
I want to comment that the last slide you guys talk about a name, the general and a class.
Yeah, general.
Yeah, this one. Yeah.
And the private. Yes.
Yeah, I'm curious. Slides. Yeah, I would say general. So we don't talk about the thing, 东西 or something. We use this a lot as a general name. Go there, go do something. You kind of hear. Here's the second. From a class. A class, let's horse. You go to more, let's say, name that horse called Jack. That's private. So more, so if you go to computer, yeah, it's very close. I would assume. Class name is class. You can make a new instance called private. That's that object, the third one. The general thing is used a lot. So that I think. Like this can compare to Western, we very specific. Which one? We go to the here is like a general thing. Do something like we use a lot. Thank you.
Yeah, James, please.
Yeah, I had a question about the action, the slide where it mentions the action as intention and
Oh, okay.
Uh,
Yeah, this one.
The
Yeah.
action is, yeah, to intend and to perform. So does the book actually divide intention from performance and discuss the differences in intention and performance?
I don't think so. Okay. So, okay. It's very difficult. Okay. And in reading Mohism, I don't see I do a good job, but I also don't think anybody ever doing a good job on this, because it's the text like this, that's the only text we have. Okay, when you describe this. So the text is very short. If you can count, that's only like 20 words. Okay, so I have to interpret. It's very difficult. Okay, so unlike if you read Plato, okay, that's a different kind of difficulty because there's too many words. Plato, Socrates in Plato's dialogue talks so long. Okay, everything he has to talk like 20 pages to explain it. That's also difficult. But Mohism has a different kind of difficulty because it's too short. So I'm sorry, James, I don't think I have a good answer for you on this. Pin may have one, so Pin, please.
No, I don't. I just want to help you out here. The Mozi, even by ancient philosophers for close to 2,000 years was considered unreadable.
Yes.
Incomprehensible. It wasn't until in the Qing dynasty, probably in the Sun Yidang, late 1800s, a scholar that's an expert, one of the premier experts in ancient language, really went through Mozi, did a lot of research to reconstruct the missing language, correct errors, and also did a lot of work to explain what the words really meant, that it became a comprehensible book.
Yeah, thank you, Pin. Yeah, it saved me a lot because it's very difficult. When I read it, but I'm really happy I can reach today's understanding. Because I remember a long time ago when I tried to do it, it's very difficult, just like no clue. And right now, I will say I have an idea what he tried to say. But if you further challenge me, what this one means, what this one, and it's difficult. Okay, so the purpose is not to teach everybody logic or dialectics. The purpose is to present what Mohism's text, okay, write it on this. So thank you, everyone. Let's move on. If we have no more questions, let's move on to some other example. Let's quickly compare to other philosophers talked about. Okay, about epistemology. Confucius said, 知之为, that's the most famous thing. Okay, the translation I like is knowing is knowing, not knowing is not knowing. It is knowing. Okay, so that's the translation I like to use. That's Confucius' word. Or if you want to literally translate, you can call it when you know a thing, to hold that you know it. And when you do not know a thing, to allow that you do not know it. This is knowledge. That's what Confucius talk about, knowledge. And of course, we have many things, and I just quickly make an example, like 道德经, okay? Taoism, Laozi, basics is against the knowledge, okay? Basically talk about without sagehood and the knowledge, the common people will live much better life, 100 times better. That's his word, okay? He wants people like uncarved block without too much knowledge, or probably the best way is no knowledge. And the last one, you also talk about cease learning and stop worrying. So learning causes problem. That's the Taoism teaching. And then if you go to the last chapter of the 道德经, I just want to show the three sentences. Trustworthy words are not beautiful. Beautiful words are not trustworthy. Good people are not eloquent. Eloquent people are not good. Okay, eloquent is the same word, 辩. Okay, and in Mohism, I translate as dialect. So Laozi doesn't want you to talk too much. Okay, wise men are not erudite, and they erudite people are not wise. Basics learning, okay, wide of knowledge, okay, broad knowledge, a lot of knowledge is not encouraged. Same thing as Zhuangzi also talking about. I think I showed this one before. Talk about there is a limit of our life, but to knowledge, there is no limit. It is dangerous to pursue after what is unlimited with what is limited. So that's also important message. So in the Taoism, also is against knowing. So you can see the different attitude, okay, between different schools during that time. You know. So that's kind of like finish on the first part, okay, about epistemology. Anything anybody want to discuss? Let's spend a few minutes to discuss this part. You can share your feeling. How do you think about this one? But try not to, let's say, let me give about like 5 minutes to discuss this one. Hugh, please.
Yeah, so my question is this. So you're saying Taoists were against knowing. So how do you explain that? I mean, he says, you know, if you know something, then it's better not to know it, because if you don't know it, then you're better off. I don't understand that logic. Could you explain that?
Yeah, just quickly explain. Yeah, it's because Taoism is in a different school. Taoism want to go back, politically, they want to go back to the primordial society. Okay, so during that time, people are fighting, the different states are fighting, they are compete for more resources. So Taoism thinking to resolve problem is because you have too much knowledge. Just like today, we say the kids, let's say our kids are spoiled. They are not, so because they use too much computer, use too much technology. I think that's the same kind of thinking on that. Okay, so.
Oh, I understand. I understand.
Right.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And any comment on this subject? Joe, please.
I just think that it's the distinction between wisdom and knowledge.
Okay.
I think that that's the way to kind of frame this, is it's not that it's praising ignorance in any sense, but it's praising more wise action. And so anyway, that's my only comment.
Yeah, thank you. And this part is a very also difficult part for me because during that time, wisdom and the knowledge, Chinese are using the same word. Okay, so it's difficult to decide what the text mean because they call 知, okay, these two are the same word during that time.
Yeah, sorry. So you're saying that in Chinese, the word for the phrase for knowledge and the phrase for wisdom is the same word?
No, during that time, but today is different. But
okay.
We are talking
during
about
that time. Okay.
2,000 years ago. That's, I think the pronunciation are different, but the writing are the same. Okay, so that's the difficult for me.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Okay,
Yeah.
We have a few hands up. Ogla, please.
Okay, hi. Maybe I'm thinking that in high levels of society, it was very common to say not the knowledge is actually bad for common people, but education. Maybe it's education, not the knowledge. Maybe it's like conflict between emotions or feelings and education, not the actual knowledge, because knowledge is what? Knowledge is about everything. I know something. I know like know about nature, about everything. So maybe it's like our education, our modern education is not good for common people. Better them to be something like get some kind of ancient, no, I don't know, ancient knowledge. Maybe this is conflict, not like knowledge and no, like it's maybe even like about education. That's my question.
Is that question?
Yes, it's the question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Well, maybe I can try.
okay, please. Tim.
Yeah, it is confusing, right? There's so many different kinds of knowledge. So what my personal opinion, of course, the Taoists, Lao Tzu and Zhuangzi really talk about what they see as knowledge that hurts nature. So knowledge as the belief is that when you're a newborn, you're a complete person and you don't have any quote knowledge. And as you go in life unfolds, you pick up all this knowledge to oftentimes to give yourself a competitive advantage in life, to win. And that's the kind of knowledge that leads to trickery, cunningness, and protecting yourself. That's, they believe every time you pick up that kind of skill, you're chipping away at the wholeness of your nature. And every time you're actually killing yourself in the process. And by the time that you become the most adept person in life, the biggest winner, you've actually completely killed yourself because your nature is a completely gone. So that's the kind of context of knowledge that the Taoists talk about.
Yeah, thank you, Pim. Yeah, and then another example is like look at the Bible, right? When Adam eat the apple, and then you get the knowledge to distinct the right and the wrong. Okay, so you make your own judgment. So it got expelled from the Garden of Eden. So around the world, knowledge are not always good, right? So the point I want to make today is I'm amazed by Mohism's writing. He tried to build a pure epistemology, okay, in his writing. He tried to analyze what is knowing and dissect the knowing process, the subject, the object, and the process. So that's the part I like to share with everyone, okay, which is common from ancient time to today, from east to west. They all the same. But Mohists start to put this one in his writing. So that's
Jason.
Yes.
Just one comment too. I think you had to look at Confucianism as a doctrine for governing, right? Because that's really what it's for, because it trains out the bureaucrats and the officials that govern society. And a society without knowledge is always easier to govern than a society with a lot of knowledge, because people with too much knowledge are troublemakers, right? And they ask questions, and they make it very difficult. You need a few of them, but you do not need the majority. You do not need them to be like that. You need them to conform and agree to what you tell them. So I think that's a very important governing principle.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and the different school, they have a different idea about education. Like, okay, let's move on to utilitarian. That's the second part I want to introduce Mohism thinking. So before I talk about Mohism, let's quickly review Jeremy Bentham. Okay, in his book on 1780s, an introduction to the principle of moral and legislation. Okay, so basically he had defined what's the utilitarian, the greatest amount of good for the greatest number of people. So on the chapter 1 in his book, nature has placed mankind under the governance of two sovereign masters, pain and pleasure. It is for them alone to point out what we ought to do, as well as to determine what we should do. Okay, reward and punishment, pain and the pleasure. And another more important thing is he is radical. Okay, the principle is radical because the key word here is for them alone, because that's the only driving force to Bentham. That's the only driving force from human psychology to the morality and eventually become a law. So Bentham is a lawyer. So this book, I read this book, it's probably like the last 30, my book is 150 pages. I remember for last 50 pages, all the writing is about laws. Okay, so everything toward to law, from the human psychology on the first chapter, and talk about how to measure the happiness and the painful. There's a different way to measure, and then he started to build the morality on that. And finally, he writes about the law, about this. That's his writing on that. So that's a quick review on what Bentham is talking about. Then we are going to compare with what Mohism is doing. So in Mohism, I also draw all this one from the Canon 1. Okay, so Mohism start from define. Okay, what's the desire? Okay, in his Canon 1, I put the number this on because the total it has 100. Okay, so he defined the desire. Okay, is the text I list the complete text, so it's very short. Okay, so desire is directly weighing the benefit, and the dislike is directly weighting the harm. So it's the benefit and the harm, weighting the benefit and the harm. That's compared to your desire and the dislike. So then he further defined what's benefit and what's harm. Benefit is what one is pleased to get, and harm is what one dislike getting. Okay, so that's his psychology defined, very similar to what Bentham is talking about. Then he defined the moral. Okay, so you will see 仁义忠孝. Okay, that's in general we translate as benevolence, righteousness, loyalty, filial piety. That's very important Confucius or ancient Chinese morality. Let's see how he defined. Okay, these four virtues. Okay, 仁 benevolence is love individually. That means not a general love, like it's like individually love. Righteousness, okay, it's considered the general good, is what is beneficial. Okay, intent, he take the whole, how do you say, he take the whole world as a field. In ability, he is able to benefit. He is not necessarily employed. I don't know what's the last sentence mean, but basically he talking about the righteousness is beneficial. Okay, loyalty. Okay, loyalty is to benefit your ruler. That's loyalty. Filial piety. Okay, what the Confucius talk about on and on. You know, I don't know how many times Confucius talking about filial piety. His definition, Mohism definition, filial piety, 孝, is to benefit your parent. So that's how Mozi define, okay, the moral, all based on utilitarian, benefit and harm. And the gong, that's the last word, the important words, that's so-called achievement. Basics is political sense, okay. All the people doing, all the political figure have to build their achievement. The achievement is to benefit people. So everything is toward to the utilitarian. So that's how Mohism's utilitarian work in this way. So any comment and any question on this part? So then.
So Jason, I have a question.
Jeff, please. Okay.
So what I'm interested in is this value, and how far it extends, because it seems to me to be expressed in a universal way, you know, seeking what is of benefit without reference to oneself or one's tribe or you know, one's family, but really seeking to promote and pursue what one might seem as the good and the right things to do in a wonderful way. And I'm very impressed that, if I understand it, that historically, you know, this person was able to persuade the leaders of various entities that were intending and prepared to go to war to decide otherwise. I'm really impressed with that. And so I'm just wondering how far this person would have extended the intention to do the right thing for, you know, the best, the most moral, the most beneficial thing for everyone, without regard to membership in one's own group or one's self as an individual.
Thank you, Jeff. Quick answer is not very far because just like Pin talked about at the beginning, right? During that time, it's very popular, the Mohism teaching. But after the end of warring state, around 200 BC, I don't think it's popular anymore. And the Confucianism become popular. And we're going to share what Confucius talking about on this one. The same word, okay, righteousness, okay. And the Confucius is totally is a different way on that. That's my answer to you. Yeah. And then you make a good comment. I also start to think about, when does the utilitarian thinking coming out, the starting in the Western world? Okay, we know Bentham, but Bentham, is there have any other philosopher in the Western, you know, have talking about this thing before? You know, that's a different.
Jason, actually, I was thinking that you didn't really give the original utilitarian credit from long time ago in Greece. That's Epicurus. Most of the stuff that Benson's talk about is pretty aligned with Epicurus without being codified into morality. Epicurus was just talking about how you should live life based on a plus and minus, right? And really, Mohism for me is probably closest to John Stuart Mill's, because for Bentham, it's really just a strict math. He would just say, oh, you know, like, so, you know, to take an extreme example, if I can kill 5 people and save 2,000 people, that is fine, right? For him, it's just a pure quantity discussion. Where Mills will talk about, yes, I admit there's a quantity involved, but also the quality, right? What about my soul? What about my morality, right? So he brings that into the equation in terms of what is this particular good, you know, is it better than the other good, right? He make a distinction between the different goods in this utility equation. So for me, yeah, Epicurus, the original, but the Mohism is probably closer to Mills than to Bentham, because Bentham is just too transactional.
Okay, thank you.
Jason.
Yeah, but okay, hold on. Okay, so thank you, and thank you for sharing. That's we have a
Jason.
Pin, yeah.
Yeah, quick comment. I know a lot of people waiting. Just to answer Jeff, yeah, in his time, it went very far. The Mohist school's popularity and organization was completely unmatched. It basically it had organizations throughout China, all over China, and with local organizers all were very influential, and the participants, you know, in each region counted in the tens of thousands. So at that time, it became very powerful movement, really a grassroots movement. And no other school of philosophy in China at that time achieved anything like that. So the question is, Jason is right, it didn't last. It was a rage for hundreds of years, and then it basically kind of disappeared. So Zhuangzi offered his analysis in the last chapter of Zhuangzi on this was, it was too demanding for people. Their role model was the ancient sage, the sage King Yu, that worked tirelessly, completely selflessly to treat the giant floods in China. So they all did that, and they were, part of their belief was extreme frugality and work day and night all the time for the people. After a while, it was so tiring and so demanding that the popularity wore out.
Yeah, thank you, Pin. When you talk about, sorry for the people waiting, I think I learned a great thing here. I realized Mohism, is very close to utilitarian. Doesn't matter it's close to John Stuart Mill or to Bentham. But what's the problem here is why they work so hard, because they are not based on Epicurean. So they don't pursue happiness. So I think that's the difference here, because Western utilitarian has Epicurean as foundation, and the Mohism doesn't have Epicurean philosophy as foundation. That's why, that's just my personal way at this moment. So Fred, that's your turn, please.
You may have covered this already because I cut out for a little while, and if you have, I apologize. But I wonder, under the canon of Mohist utilitarianism, how competing claims of beneficence are resolved. For example, if the benefit to your parents conflicts with the benefit to your ruler, which one wins?
Well, first, there's no answer. And then there's been 1,000 years of discussion about so-called Zong and the Xiao, loyalty and piety, all right? So that's wrong again and again, the story on that. Ideal situation, if you're loyal to your country, also loyal to your parents. But it's always have the exception. So that's a long.
But that's a great question. That's what differs, I think, biggest differentiation between Mozi and Confucianists, and that's why they attacked each other all the time. Mozi's answer I would guess is you weigh whichever benefits more people. And then the Confucianist answer would be, no, you put your parents first. You put the people closest to you first.
Well, I have no objection on this one, but that's a big question, actually. Fred, you asked a question being discussed for 1,000 years in China. Okay, let's move on. Hugh and Joe. Okay, Hugh, please.
Yes. Yes. So is it true, and I need to clarify this. I had a friend years ago who spoke the Hakka language, the Chinese language, and he said there is no word in that dialect for love. He said there's a word for like, but not for love. Is this correct?
Well, I speak Hakka, okay? It's probably correct. Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Wait, Hakka doesn't have I. 客家话没有I.
Wow. At least in my family, we don't say this word. Sorry about
No, the reason why I ask is I just wondered if they couldn't come up with the proper concept of love. Were they having a problem with the word love? Is it cultural? Is it, these are the things that
maybe I can clarify a little bit. I don't speak Hakka, but at least in Mandarin, there's definitely, and in Chinese, there's definitely the word love.
Okay.
And it's everywhere in ancient texts. But Chinese people, at least traditional Chinese people, don't say "I love you." That's like a foreign term.
And is that what does that translate culturally?
Okay.
That's what I'm asking.
Yeah. Okay. So
Yeah.
okay, the trend that's a very difficult question. Okay. So just like a Greek love have 7 different kinds of love, right? And then in Bible, okay, we talk about the love is apaga, right? And also filial, also eros. That's a
Yes,
different word.
yes.
Same as the Chinese, and I do I'm working on the Dao De Jing translation. Sometimes I translate the 词, okay, as a love, and the love is like or care, okay. So that's a different thing on that, okay. And that's focus on Mohism teaching. They talk about general love, and I believe, or impartial love. I believe this love is talking about the apaga. Okay, the Greek kind apaga, general, everyone. And here, Ren, Confucius talking about Ren, benevolence. That's also another kind of love. Okay, so that's a big question. Okay, so
no, thank you. I just wanted to clarify, and I think you've answered the question.
All right, thank you. Okay, so let's move on for Joseph, Joe, Jen, and Kevin. Then I'm going to. Okay, yeah, okay. Joe, please.
Yeah, my question will be very quickly. Is that this idea of Mohism and not directly weighing harm, how does that relate to, say, somebody like John Stuart Mill's perspective on harm, where it was basically people are free to act unless they cause harm to someone else? Is there any kind of relationship between those two?
I don't see any relationship here because, okay, again, Mohism writing is very short. That's all the text I show, okay? So they kind of define what's benefit, okay? And at least I don't read anything about Mohism. If your question is about Mohism teaching, my answer is I don't know because it's very few words. That's the only word I have, and then I do my.
I read the text for the PDF. I mean, the example they give when you get robbed, and
hold on, Chris, you talking about the Mohism or the general?
Mohism. I mean, because the harm I think the speaker was talking about on Mills is the harm you cause to others.
Yeah.
Where when Mohism talking about minimize the harm is about minimize the overall harm, not necessarily just to other, but to yourself as well. Is the situation, right? It's more of a definitive statement on the overall versus to the others. So I think the harm are in completely two different contexts.
I'm not sure, okay.
So for example, if I get robbed, and I, and then I can get 2 finger cut off or 1 finger cut off, if I minimize the harm, I only have 1 finger cut off. That's harm to me, right? Where like just take the COVID example, right? If I'm already positive, I don't wear a mask, I go into indoor space, I'm actually causing potentially harm to others, and they're 2 different things.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Yes, that's correct. Yeah, I think we shared last week, right? He talked about you met a robber and you can lose 1 arm and save your life. That's kind of harm, the minimize your harm, but you can, yeah. Thank you for reminding me this, I forget. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
James, please.
Yeah, I was really moved by what Pin said about Mohism being a widely distributed social movement across China that burned brightly for hundreds of years, perhaps, and then kind of like eventually disappeared. And this would be political. This would partly be, I suppose, because of the difficulty of people comprehending and following and understanding the philosophy, but also because of political movement, perhaps possibly some dynasties and leaders found some of the ideas inconvenient, and this comparison with Bentham, I think is really fascinating because Bentham's philosophy has suffered a similar fate. In other words, Benthamism is considered too complicated nowadays. People pass laws, or legislatures pass laws because of nationalist relevance and because of political pressures and lobbying. They no longer use Benthamism as a gauge to decide on how to craft laws and how to maybe it's a precondition, the idea that you don't do harm and you try to help, but it's more or less carried as that liberal philosophy is more or less carried forward unconsciously. The idea is that you don't lose your support, your voter support. You have to keep your voter support. You have to remember how many people have to have jobs in your back in your home state, and so forth. So you're not concerned with Benthamism anymore. It's too complicated. And the same thing with this Mohism, the Mohism it was a little bit too complex of an ethical philosophy to follow, which I think a lot of us, that when I've studied like the Epicureanism, when I looked at Epicureanism, I said, holy smokes, this isn't really a philosophy. I mean, I didn't see it as something that somebody would want to follow, but I've met a couple of Epicureans. You know, it's true that people consider it, but most people wouldn't consider it. So it's like this. It's like, what is something that people will actually believe in? Well, a lot of these ideas could be right and useful and seem like a coherent system, like as they were. But on the other hand, the political is probably more important than what people will actually follow might not always be the necessarily most rational path. They'll always fall back to this comfortable level of Confucianism, perhaps. I'd like to hear any comments on that.
All right, thank you, James. Kevin, please.
Thank you, JP. Oh, maybe I need to switch. Hold on.
Kevin?
Let me switch my earset.
Okay, so let me, okay.
How better?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I want to, this page from the 7, 8, 12, 13, 35. I'm going for 7. Then it's kind of human. So this is changes basically from this right column, all benefit not from self. That's your values based how you benefit for others. The first one is basically you love individual others. The second one, E, riches is benefit for your community, your partner, your group. The third one, Zhong, loyalty, the benefit your ruler, your boss, your company. There's a lot. Second, show, filial pity, generally benefit for your parents or your family. The last one is benefit for the people as a general. However, I want to rephrase again. From 7 now, we're going to more like modelize the values from yourself. Start, I need to benefit myself first, then think about others. Then, A, you have to self-love yourself, then benefit. Second, E, it's kind of, we now kind of contract-based monetary. You pay me, I do a job. Zhong, especially Zhong loyalty, used to be previous generation, you work for a company, I look for your loyalty, not just your ability. These days, you could be individual feel different. No, I don't hire the full-time job. I rather than a contract, because I don't need you just easily dismiss a contract. And show Yeah, so another, and it's a very, it used to be young people respect the elderly and respect parents and grandparents. Now upside down kind. Since especially in China, it's like from the one child, you got two parents. Each parent got another parent. So basically 6 adults above you raise a grandchild or child. So this is different. And last one, achievement. Normally, not achievement to the people. How much you can contribute for yourself? Are you worth for the money, for the payment? It's, I mean, the meaning is changed. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, and then I will suggest everyone remember what Mohism define all this word, and then when we read Confucius and other things, they see how they defined, how the same word have been defined differently. Just like Kevin talked about, in today, we probably define totally different than that time. So we have a Mandarin, then we are going to move on, so we have a last part to talk about. Mandarin, please.
Yes. Well, I'm looking at sort of thinking about how all this fits together. So in the knowledge slide, the fourth thing was, so there was names, actualities, a proposition that which combines name and actuality paired with each other. And then there's an action, which is to intend and to perform. Then there were the 7 methods of dialectics, which are ways intended for people to reach agreement. So I know that the Mohists were really quite scientifically advanced in terms of not just scientific knowledge, but application as well. And so that they, one of the reasons that that slide with the 71 chapters seems like this kind of crazy jumble at first glance to the Western mind, actually is putting those things together and using them at the end in terms of what they did with them. But they also applied those things socially, because they went around and used their skills to shore up, I think, the smaller states against the larger ones. So that would be kind of the application of their harm and benefit thing, using the methods of dialectics, I think, to arrive at ways of scientific reasoning to come up with the different inventions and weaponry.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, that's important. You see, this school is very different from others. That's why they define the knowledge, including the action to perform. So intend and perform, right? So they are not just like Madeline talked about. It's crazy, like have 71 chapters, humongous writing, and they are not just write it. They do it. So the action also included. So that's different than other school. They talk a lot, and then I also think about the situation, why they talk about the logic, dialect, all this kind of thing. I think they are debating, they argue against other schools. And that's I think, because they have different, I think in his illustration 1 and 2, they have argued different, like school of name, Taoism, and Confucianism, but they don't pick the name. They don't mention anybody's name other than Confucius, but they are arguing against different schools. Let's quickly look at when we define the moral, how does Mencius talking about? I think I copied from Pin's presentation. Okay, last year, when Mencius saw King Hui of Liang, the king asked, that's the old man who come undeterred by 1,000 miles of travel. Surely you have something will profit my state. Okay, and the Mencius' answer is just opposite. Why must your majesty speak of profit? I have only Ren, humanity, and Yi, righteousness, to offer. When the king say, what will profit my state? Senior officials say, what will profit my clan? Rank and file and the commoner said, what will profit myself? Superior and inferior compete for profit, blah, blah, blah. So Mencius, the Confucius school teacher, is not talking about profit. They want to talk about righteous. They want to talk about Ren. Okay. So that's the way to compare, how different this school, these two schools. And that's also answer the question, I think, Jeff, is about how far, okay, this Mohism teaching go. Yeah, it's go very far geographically, but cannot last very long because later on, Chinese like to talk about the Ren and the Yi, benevolence and the righteous, and don't want to talk about profit. Okay. So Mencius, this writing is play an important role, in this one. And then we have more on that, but I'm not going to show more on the Confucius, because the Confucius is kind of not want to talk too much about profit. They want to talk about the Ren and the Yi, which is benevolence and righteousness. So we finish the second part, and then we have 30 minutes. Let me go through for the nature state argument. That's the one I think also important, which is not in Mo Jing, that's in his different chapter. Okay, so he talked about moral state. So here's, I copy from the Thomas Hobbes, the state of nature. So first, he talked about state of nature is a state of war. And the life of man, solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. So long as man is in the condition of mere nature, which is a condition of war, a private appetite is a measure of good and evil. Okay, so that's copy from state of Thomas Hobbes, the Leviathan, I think. Yeah, I forgive the misspelling. That's not my spelling. That's how Thomas Hobbes spell in his English. Okay, and then Thomas Hobbes talk about the social contract, establishing sovereign authority to seek peace with willing others by laying down part of our right to all things, by mutually covenanting to submit to the authority of a sovereign, and further direct us to keep that covenant, establishing sovereignty. So social contract in Thomas Hobbes is different than John Locke. Okay, Thomas Hobbes' social contract is the contract with the government, give the right to government, have the government protect us. So his idea of king or the ruler is absolutism. Okay, so the king has absolute power. The effective of government, whatever its form, must have absolute authority. Its power must be neither divided nor limited. The power of legislation, adjudication, enforcement, taxation, war-making are connected in such a way that the loss of one may thwart effective exercise of the rest. So that's Thomas Hobbes about the state of nature, from the state of nature of war and to social contract to his government, which is absolutism. So that's the Thomas Hobbes. And we are going to see how Moses writing. So on his writing, so-called the books, the chapter 11, identifying with the superior. Now we'll see how Mohism argued about his moral and his idea of government. Okay, so I'm going through this text. It's long, but I'm going to be patient with me. I'm going through the text on this one, which is chapter 11. Basically, I identify as the 6 major paragraph. So first, talking about the state of nature, okay, and then talking about the creation of government, the morality, how does the moral generate, and unifying the moral standard, and then he bring in opposite than Thomas Hobbes. Thomas Hobbes basically reject the divine power of the king, but the power is based on the contract. And Mohism is still use the will of heaven, okay, to legitimate the power of the ruler. And then finally, Mohism, Moses is talking about the law of punishment. So that's how he's writing. Let's go through on that. So first paragraph, okay. So Moses said, in the beginning of human life, when there was yet no law and government, the custom was everybody according to his own idea. Accordingly, each man has his own idea. 2 men have 2 different ideas. 10 men has 10 different ideas. The more people, the more different notions. And everybody approve of his own view and disapprove the views of others. And so allows mutual disapproval among men. As a result, father and the son and the elder and the younger brothers became enemies and were estranged from each other. Since they were unable to reach any agreement, everybody worked for the disadvantage of the other. With water, fire, poison, surplus energy was not spent for mutual aid. Surplus goods were allowed to rot without sharing. Excellent teaching, which means Tao, were kept sacred and not revealed. The disorder in the human world could be compared to among birds and beasts. When we talk about birds and beasts, that means in the barbarian situation. So that's the nature state argument from Moses' writing. It's very similar to Thomas Hobbes' argument about. So the nature state, unlike Rousseau, nature state is peaceful, everybody, enjoy their life, which is similar to Taoism's nature state. But Mohism nature state is similar to Thomas Hobbes, which is in a terrible situation, almost like Thomas Hobbes, the state of nature is the state of war, people fighting because I use my own moral stand, you use your moral stand. So that's the need to create the government. Let's see how Mohism teaching, okay, how to create how does the government is created. Yet all disorder was due to the want of a ruler. We need a ruler. Therefore, heaven chose the virtuous in the world and crowned him emperor. Okay, so it's divine power. Okay, fearing the insufficiency of his capacity, the emperor chose the virtuous in the world and installed them as the 3 ministers. 3 ministers, 三公, that means 3 seniors. Traditionally, Chinese use 3 ministers, 3 senior ministers to assist the emperor. The emperor and the 3 ministers seeking the vastness of the empire and the difficulty of attending to matters of right and wrong and the profit and harm among people of far countries, divided the emperor into feudal states and assigned them to feudal lords. Fearing the insufficiency of their capacity, the feudal lords in turn chose the virtuous of their states and appointed them as their officials. So the idea of Mohism government is from heaven will choose the most virtuous people as the emperor. The emperor considered the state, the vast, the huge country, so he need assistant. So have 3 ministers, they all virtuous. And then blah, 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 then they have the feudal state, and each state they have the village. So the higher position are being chosen based on because they are virtuous. That's the number 2. Then how does the morality get created?
Hey, Jason, can I ask a question?
Yeah, please.
The previous slide, I look at the original text, it doesn't say heaven anywhere. So is this the translators? To me, it seems that the translator is inserting his own
Yes, because okay.
own ideology into this text.
Yeah, I thank you for mentioning this one. I put this one because let me answer this one later because
Okay.
yeah,
let's move on.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, number 3, how does the more, because like when the ruler were all installed, the emperor issued a mandate to all people saying, upon hearing good or evil, one should report to a superior. What does the superior think to be right? All should think to be right. What the superior thinks to be wrong? All should think to be wrong. Okay, I just have to read this part. Basics is talking about the moral standards. You have to follow the superior. Okay, so the superior make this basis of reward and the punishment. He was the clear-sighted and won his own people's confidence. So basics here is talking about the moral. You have to follow your boss, your superior. Okay, so that's the way Mohism is teaching on this one. Okay, so number 4, they are going to unifying the moral standard. This one actually I make it simple because they have like 5 or 6 paragraphs going through this one, and they just repeat the same thing again and again. So pay attention on the word I put in a different color. Basically, let's look at the system. Okay, to answer Pin's question, that's the heaven coming from. Okay, because heaven, the lowest organization is village, then district, then state, then the kingdom, then the heaven. So remember, all the head are being pointed, okay, by the superior. So heaven pointed the emperor of the kingdom, kingdom pointed the head of the state, and state point different head for the district, and the districts, the head of district pointed the head of village. Okay, and this one. So that's a hierarchical system. So that's his writing, and they have for each level they have the one paragraph. Okay, they all similar. I just use one. Okay. Now the head of village from the bottom, okay, was the most virtuous. Okay, he used the word "ren." Okay, people of the village. He notified the people of the village, saying, upon hearing good or evil, you should report to the head of the district. So that means he told the head of district, tell the people, okay, in the village, say, if you find something wrong, you have to report to my boss. Okay, not report to me, report to my boss. Okay, when the head of the district think is right, all should think to be right. So basically, the village, the head of village tell the people, if you find something wrong, okay, you should report to my boss. Okay, whatever my boss talking about, that's right. Okay, and then he continue. Okay, let's put away from your speech that which is not good, and then his good speech. Remove from your conduct which is not good, and then his good conduct. How there be disorder in district? Now, how was order brought about in district? There was order in the district because the head could unify the standard of the district. So look at this one. Basically, the head of village will ask people to organize, unify the moral standard with the district. And then the next paragraph will start the same writing, but from the district, head of district talk about the head, okay, of village. You have to follow the head of the state, okay. Then blah, 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 then emperor tells you you have to follow the heaven. So turnout is from the bottom to up. Everybody will follow your superior and up to the heaven. Okay, so that's why I go with the will of heaven is important. So finally, he talked about if, however, the people all identify themselves with the emperor emperor is the son of heaven, but not with heaven itself, then the natural disaster are still happening. So remember, that's the way kind of like guarantees everybody follow the heaven. You are not just follow the emperor, you also have to follow the will of heaven. Again, now the frequent visitation of hurricane and the torrent are just the punishment from the heaven on the people for their not identifying their standard with the will of heaven. Okay, so basics, that's his moral idea. Everybody have to follow the heaven. Okay, so then finally go to the his political idea. So they said, the Moses said, the sage king devised the 5 punishments to rule the people in order to be able to lay hands on those who did not identify themselves with their superior, a device of the same nature as thread and tie into skin and a net controlled by a man rope. This is the control those who are not conforming with the spirit. So that's the law of the punishment, to make sure everybody match with their spirit. So if you compare with Bentham's writing, okay, you can see the similarity, okay, the same logic follow. It's a lot of detail you can argue. It's reasonable, it makes sense, it's practical. That's a lot of things we can talk about. But forgive Moses, he is 2,500 years ago. Okay, so but the purpose of here is not telling everybody he's right or he's wrong. The purpose here is to show everyone how his writing going and compare with 17th century Thomas Hobbes or 16th century Thomas Hobbes writing, how their similarity and the different way they are thinking. That's told to James, please.
Yeah, I think we finally got around to answering, to having Motu answer Jenny's question. There's always if you're not happy with the emperor, there's always the rule of heaven that you might want to consider. So you know, it's really and the laws of punishment, you know, seem to apply here. So they're definitely authoritarian. We might call these 5 punishments to rule the people and get them on their skeins, you know, and keep them on their strains, controlled by a main rope. You know, this is not your dad's democracy. This is a authoritarian point of view. So I'm glad we got here. Yeah.
Thank you, James. Pin. Yes.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So the comparison with Confucianism. Number one, the thing about the natural disasters is a sign of heaven. That actually, I see the great influence. A few hundred years later, Dong Zhongshu, the famous Han Dynasty Confucianist scholar, you know, I thought he's credited with inventing the theory of heaven and people, 天人合一, combined into one. Part of the whole theory is that these anomalies in nature and in the skies, such as comets and whatnot, and earthquakes, that is a sign of the ruler losing the trust of heaven, mandate of heaven. So that's interesting. I didn't know that there was this influence actually from Mozi that's adopted by the later Confucianists. And another thing is that Mozi and Confucianists both believe in the mandate of heaven, but the interpretation is so different, because Mencius believe, well, both Confucius and Mencius are very against harsh punishment of people. And then the Mencius profess that the mandate of heaven is reflected by whether the people are happy or not. And if they're not happy, they have the right to revolt and overthrow the ruler. And if they're successful, that's the clearest evidence that this was the mandate of heaven, that this ruler was meant to be overthrown. So it's very interesting, the similarities and the contrast.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, who's next? Chris, please.
So yeah, I think I read it a little differently. I think there's a pretty clear distinction between Hobbes and Mo, because Hobbes, really at the end, he is saying that anything is better than anarchy. Anything is better than like just rulelessness and everybody clubbing her that's like, you know, was no order whatsoever. So even if a pure evil tyrant took over your society, as long as that he or she can maintain basic semblance of order, right, and enforce whatever rule that he put out or she put out, you have to obey this person and his or her government, right? That's really what Hobbes is saying. That's where most times people have problems with Hobbes, because basically Hobbes' philosophy is very transactional. It condones basically all type of government as long as it can maintain basic order. Where I read the mandate of heaven a little differently, it's basically saying, because until he mentioned this whole will of heaven, it's very similar to Hobbes, right? It basically saying that, you know, if Jason came in as a ruler and he says, you know, nobody can eat chicken, right? And then I came in, I overthrew Jason, and Chris says everybody can eat chicken now, but nobody can eat pork, right? That's like, you know, people are just gonna have to follow us, right? They had no choice because we're the ruler at that particular point in time. But the using will heaven as a euphemism is really more saying, hey, you still, even though you have the power as a ruler, you still need the mandate from the people, right? Because if you do everything against the people, you cannot maintain your power long. You know, like for me, like the hurricanes, the flood, the earthquakes, all those things are euphemism, right? They're just saying potentially people, you know, bad things will happen to you, right? You know, like not only natural disaster, but all kind of disasters, and your rule will not last if you govern poorly. I think that's really what he's saying, versus just saying, you know, the Confucius way, which is basically you had to follow the mandate of the people. So I read it, that's how I read it. I read it more as he wanted to say a little differently than how Confucius said it, you know, in terms of saying the will of heaven, but it comes down to the same thing where there's a basic set of universal governance that even as powerful as a ruler cannot violate, because you violate those things, then your rule won't last, which is very different from what Hobbes saying. It's more, that particular point of view is more closer to John Locke's and Mill's, where they say, hey, you know, like you might have the power, but you don't have the right. You have the power to oppress people, but you don't have the right to oppress people, right? Where Hobbes says there's no distinction.
All right, thank you, Chris. Yeah, let's move on to Madeline, please.
Okay, back at slide number 1, the state of nature,
Okay.
In which Mohism seems to largely agree with Hobbes. You know, in fact, they're both wrong. So the problem is that they're starting their arguments from something that never existed. Okay, so we have the advantage now of knowing that human beings evolved from some proto-ancestor of us and some other primates. And we evolved continuously, really through cooperating in groups of various sizes. So there never was a condition in which everyone was working for themselves. it was always more of a cooperative groups of different sizes and different social structures, whether they were roving bands or agricultural or something. So both Hobbes and Mohism, it seemed as if they are maybe, I mean, just to be charitable, I'll say that they're basing this on their observations of predator-prey relationships. But really, you know, Hobbes was a sophisticated man. He had read accounts of travels, like, say, to the New World, like to North America. Mohism, certainly people had traveled to the southern part of the Chinese continent and seen that those crazy barbarians who spoke Hakka still had social organization. And so that really, this really didn't exist anywhere. And so I think that what's going on is that they're both using this to justify their later arguments. In other words, they're kind of making up this imaginary state of nature to justify things that come later on. And what this imaginary state of nature is really, I'd call it sort of unbridled individualism or unbridled selfishness, the way we see it manifest in society when people take advantage of other people. It's not something that actually ever existed sort of by itself back in some, I don't know, I guess what, before the golden age, there was an age of, but what do we call it? The sewage age? I mean, it looks pretty bad. So, okay, well, I lost my train of thought, but that was mostly what I meant to say. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Madeline. Yeah, just one thing I'd like to correct you, because Hakka doesn't speak in the south during that time. Hakka was speak in the mainland, the central part of mainland, because during the certain time, I forget which age, the people migrate from central part, okay, of China to the south, and then they carry the original language, which become Hakka. Okay, so people speak Hakka is the authentic Chinese language. Okay, so that's the little thing I need to correct. Thank you, Madeline. Anyway, Karen, please.
Yeah, I think other people asked about this issue, but I'm wondering how much of this is a sort of a story about how you emerge from chaos to good governance, and how much of it is a prescription for people to do what their leaders tell them to do, right? Because it sort of says, you know, like if you could describe how an engine functions perfectly for your car to work great, that's one thing. But if you happen to have a broken engine, you have a broken engine. So you don't want to treat it like it's not broken. So it could be that this says, you know, this is how you fight this chaos that comes when you don't have good governance, or when you have a state of nature where people are not governed. You have, you know, you break that when you have good ruler who's blessed by the heavens to have virtue. And if they can identify other virtuous people to help them, and then they can convince people to obey that structure of going to the right people for the right kind of advice at the right time, you'll get order, and you'll end the chaos, and even the weather will be better as a result, right? But if you happen to be in a place where the leader is not virtuous, maybe that's a separate question of what you do in that circumstance, because there is this underlying Mohist, not only the command to do what's most beneficial, right, which might be, as others have said, overthrowing this particular bad ruler, and also there was that really interesting, and I'm not sure I understood it, stuff at the end of the chapter in the reading for today about you can, attack the robber without attacking the man, right? So presumably if a ruler is a bad ruler, I can attack the bad guy without attacking heaven or rulers in general, right? One assumes, if he can make those kind of distinctions. So I guess my question is, how much is this like just a description of how a good society should be organized, and how much of it is telling you just do what your leaders say?
Okay, let me provide my answer. Okay, and Pin, do you have an answer on this? Yeah, my
related, but you go first. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that this one is he tried to build a theory, okay, of his political view. Okay, okay. So that's on whether or not they really have a natural state. That's kind of like assumption. Okay, in the mathematics we self-evident. Okay, so that's a starting point, and then that's built. That's a theory, and the whole thing. That's my understanding when I read this one, and I believe Thomas Hobbes also doing the same thing. You know, to build his own theory, and they have their own purpose on that. So to me, my interest is less on whether or not this one is practical, is good, is faulty or perfect. My personal interest would be, it's amazing for the people in a different way. They talk about almost the same thing in a different way, and they have a lot of similarity and there are some difference. To me, I really enjoy to compare the difference. So that's just my. You have an answer on this one, or?
Well, just some thoughts to share. I agree with Karen a lot. I have the slide right above number 4. Yeah, I have a slightly different interpretation of the last sentence, the bolded. My interpretation is that the head could unify the opinions of the district. So in that, what I see is a person who's a virtuous enough leader that this person can unify the opinions because people respect this person. And so that's how this is built from the ground up. But I think Karen's point is interesting but you know, a lot of this Mozi seems to be kind of a defensive argument against other schools, anticipating how other schools will attack his theory. So he's putting this contingency here. Like, yeah, I know you're going to tell me that this is too idealistic. It's not going to work out this way. He's going to put in the little clause and the contingency. Like, if it doesn't work, apply all these punishments.
Yeah, thank you, Pim. Yeah. Yeah, I think the one smart thing in the Mozi, I talk about Mozi, the whole writings, I don't think he mentioned anybody's name except Confucius. He talked about Confucius something, okay? But he doesn't talk about like Taoism, whatever, or he doesn't mention much about the name or school, okay? Or school name. But I think he, just like you say, they built the contingency to, like, I know you are going to argue on this one. And that's why they put a lot of effort to develop their dialectic and the logic and the name. That's why I do it. So our time is up, and then we have Fred been waiting for a long time. Thank you, Fred. And then you have the final word, and you can draw the conclusion for today. Thank you, Fred.
No conclusions here, but maybe a synthesis. I see a parallel between both Mencius and Mozi in Thomas Hobbes, because Thomas Hobbes, and this is also, it relates to Karen's comment that what's critical is the emergence of order from chaos, in that Hobbes in no way was asserting that this state of nature in all of its brutality should serve as a principle of good governance. Quite the opposite, that the state of nature leads to chaos, and the emergence of rulers and obedience to a ruler is the way you preserve order and hold chaos in abeyance. And that disorder, chaos is anarchy, is the worst state. Even if you have a bad ruler, your recourse should be not to rebel against the ruler, according to Hobbes and also according to Motsu. But if in effect to be patient, because number one, the ruler will lose his state pretty quickly if he's a terrible ruler. And number two, the heavens or God will judge him, and we have to be patient, and eventually good will out, whether in this life or the next life. For Hobbes specifically says he offers a large part of the Leviathan is a guide for rulers. He specifically says that we should judge the honor of a ruler based on how much he benefits those beneath him. And one of his main points is that if the ruler is a terrible ruler, chaos will ensue. And chaos is the absolute worst thing for both the populace and the ruler. So a wise ruler would judge wisely by benefiting those beneath him, which seems to come right out of Mencius. Hobbes would exactly agree that don't talk to me about the individual profit to you as a ruler. Let's talk about what's good and beneficial and do that as a ruler. So there's a synthesis of the two in Hobbes.
All right, thank you, Fred. And then I will conclude today. And thank you, everyone. And next week, Pin will talk about, which just change the gear, and let's do something more happy, okay, for the happy journey. And Pin is going to lead us on the happy journey. And that's a very—
Thank you, Jason. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason.
See you next week. And
Jason.
Thanks, Jason.
so see you
Thanks,
guys.
Jason.
Thank you for joining
Thanks,
us.
Jason.
See you.
Thanks, Jason.
All right.
Take care, Jason.
See you next week.